Hello everyone, Just Podcast TV is here. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified on new content.
Episode 114. You never know how they will react. Who are you? James asked. He was annoyed by the man's attitude, but in order not to undermine the authority of someone he thought was his employee, he remained polite. Never mind who I am, the man replied. You only need to know what she said. You can't stay here tonight. His swaggering tone was really getting on James's nerves, but he didn't want to overreact. He was in a good mood after returning to civilization, as were the three women with him, and he didn't want to spoil the atmosphere. He sized up the man carefully. To be honest, the guy wasn't terribly impressive. His 1980s hairstyle was completely out of date, and he projected an ordinary presence, the kind of person who could easily get lost in the crowd. On the other hand, he was dressed sharply in a stylish linen suit. James suspected he came from a prominent family on Blaha Island and was used to bossing others around. The man placed his hand on the young clerk's shoulder in a protective gesture. She cringed. It was obvious she disliked him and didn't appreciate the inappropriate touching. Now that James had a clear understanding of the situation, he knew how to handle it. He studiously ignored the man and said to the clerk, I think you must have misunderstood, Miss Koza. I said I was looking for your manager, not this guy, whoever he is. As intended, that stung the guy's ego. Didn't you hear what I said? He snarled. Now get out of here. Now James was losing his patience. He'd been trying to keep a low profile, but this arrogant clown was provoking him. And he was trying to show off in front of the young clerk to boot. What are you waiting for? Move, the guy yelled. He started to close the distance between them. He looked like he was ready to fight. Kaya rushed over and grabbed his arm to stop him. Henry, please, what are you doing? She knew Henry Rakoto could be unpredictable, even dangerous. But by now she could tell there had been a misunderstanding, and this foreign tourist was actually quite polite. Henry shrugged her hand off but continued to glare at James. Last chance, buddy, he said coldly. Are you going to leave the premises? James glared right back. What if I don't, he said. What Henry did next surprised everyone for its irrational impulsiveness. He picked up a wooden stool and fiercely swung it toward James's head. The other guests and employees in the lobby were appalled. What the? Is it a robbery? Call security! Kaya Koza just stood rooted in place, frightened by the swift, violent outburst. Unfortunately for Henry Rakoto, he had no idea who he was attacking. James, looking relaxed the entire time, grabbed the stool with one hand as it crashed towards his head. It stopped instantly, as if it hit a wall. Vanessa, Krista, and Katie just watched the scene calmly. They knew exactly how it was going to turn out. Henry's eyes widened in surprise. He was expecting to brain this insolent punk and be done with it, not encounter some sort of fighting expert. He tried to pull the stool back, but no matter how hard he yanked, it wouldn't budge out of James's grip. His face turned red with fury as he tugged on the stool with no effect. In the next moment, James flung Henry and the stool across the room, crashed to the floor, the stool dropping on his head. Oh my God! Kaya cried out in shock. Her small eyes blinked hard, not believing what she just saw. James placed his hands behind his back and slowly approached Henry. The corner of his mouth rose slightly, carrying a trace of an icy smile. He looked down on the crumpled figure below him. Don't ever assault someone you don't know, he said coolly. You just never know how they will react. Rakoto tried to scramble to his feet. Before he could, James kicked him hard in the stomach. He rolled up into a ball and collapsed back to the ground. James next grabbed him by the hair and dragged him across the lobby floor. Henry could only cry out in pain. Ouch! Ow! 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 James ignored him. He dragged him straight to the door and tossed him into the street in a heap. Henry got to his feet with rage in his eyes and pointed a trembling finger. You're dead now, he screamed. James just spread his hands innocently. Unfortunately for you, I am still very much alive, he said. But somebody is going to die if they don't get lost, and it ain't gonna be me. Henry knew he was no match for this freak's unusual strength. He needed backup. "Just you wait," he sputtered, then scurried off down the street. James just snorted dismissively, turned around, and walked back into his hotel. Get him. Seeing James walk into the hotel looking angry, Krista quickly came up to comfort him. "The fool is not worth your anger," she said. Vanessa and Katie joined her. "That's right. Don't be angry," Vanessa said while Katie gently grabbed his arm. Okay, I'm not angry," he reassured them. "It's just that dude ruined my good mood." Kaya Koza rushed up to him next. "Sir, I am so sorry to have caused you so much trouble. Do you need me to contact the police for you?" "No need," James said, "but thank you for your concern. Who was that guy anyway?" She did not expect the question. Kaya hesitated at first, then said, "He is the son of a local big shot. His family is very influential in this area. The shops and hotels have to pay protection fees to them every month, but in reality, it's just extortion. His father has the local officials in his back pocket, so they just turn a blind eye to it. Nobody can do anything about it." Kaya looked at the front door as if she expected Henry to burst in with an army of thugs. "For your own safety, you and the lady should leave," she said anxiously. James was not happy about this. They weren't on a pirate-infested deserted island anymore. They were in a lawful society now. Kaya tried again. "Henry Riccotto is very vengeful. You beat him up just now. He will bring people to take revenge on you." James remained perfectly calm in the face of her anxiety. "Thank you for the reminder, Miss Koza, but I am not going anywhere." Men like Riccotto and his underlings may have seemed like unstoppable thugs to her, but to him, who had experienced much more dangerous adversaries, they were nothing but a gang of schoolyard bullies. He had the physical strength to not fear them, for one, and this was his property now. He needed to protect it. Besides, the system hadn't notified him that the check-in had succeeded, so he couldn't leave even if he wanted to. "But sir," Kaya said, "remember what I told you. There are no rooms here tonight." James ignored that. "Why is this Mr. Riccotto so interested in you?" he asked. It was as if he'd poked her sore spot. "I hate him. He is a disgusting piece of trash," she said. "So why does he seem to be so interested in you?" he asked again. James normally would never pry into another person's business, but Kaya was now his employee. He needed to know the dynamics in the hotel before he took charge of it. "It's like this," she replied. "I'm a new employee. The day I started here, he brought a group of his boys in to collect the fees, and he happened to run into me at the front desk. From then on, he's been showing up almost every day and pestering me with flowers and stuff. But his family is powerful, so I don't dare to directly refuse." When she was done, James thought for a moment, then spoke up. "Why don't I leave, you're wondering? Because I will not see my employee being bullied like this." Kaya just looked at him. Did he just say my employee? She was completely stunned. And she wasn't the only one. Vanessa, Katie, and Krista had no idea what he was talking about. Krista was the first to react. "Your employee?" She and the others were doing the math in their heads. The apartment in New York City, the luxury yacht, the oceanside villa in the Maldives. Now he had a hotel on Blaha Island? James knew the ladies would have a lot of questions, but now was not the time to explain. Actually, he would never explain it, because he could never let anyone know about the system. He'd think of something to tell them at some point. Ignoring their puzzled looks, he turned to Kaya, who was picking up the front desk phone. I'll call the manager now," she said. Before she could finish dialing, there was the sound of screeching car brakes right outside the hotel. It was followed by slamming doors and heavy footsteps. Then Henry Riccotto's arrogant voice could be heard at the front desk. "Where is that jerk?" Kaya put the phone down, trembling in fear. James remained as calm as ever. I guess I'd better go deal with this, he said, as if the thug outside was nothing more than a persistent solicitor trying to sell postcards to the guests. He walked slowly out of the hotel with his hands behind his back. Henry was standing on the sidewalk with 10 tough-looking brutes behind him, all holding steel pipes. James glanced at them indifferently. "There's no need to shout," he said, completely unruffled. "I'm right here." Compared to the mafia goons in New Jersey and the AK-47 armed pirates on the high seas, this little collection of wannabe gangsters was nothing. Henry pointed at James and said, "There he is. He's the one who disrespected me." The men didn't say a word. They just moved in, ready to club him to the ground with their pipes. James stood there. He had no intention of dodging their attack. 16. Fist Fight Superstar. "James! Don't! Be careful, sir." Vanessa, Katie, and Krista had followed James to the door and began shouting to him as soon as they saw what was happening. Although they believed in his strength, he was facing 10 burly guys with steel pipes. A single blow from one of them could cave in his skull. Kayakova did not know anything about James's abilities, so her heart was in her throat. The thugs closed in fast, pipes raised. James finally moved. It happened so fast it was difficult to see. With a mere sway of his body, he shifted away from where he'd been standing. Then he counterattacked. In the blur of action in front of them, all anyone could hear were the dull sounds of fists and feet hitting flesh. It was followed by a chorus of miserable wails. In less than 30 seconds, James had defeated all the fighters Henry Riccotto had brought with him. James dusted his hands melodramatically and looked at Henry, whose jaw had dropped open. "Is that everyone?" he asked casually. Henry was completely dumbfounded when he saw his 10 men sprawled out on the ground. Who was this guy? Was he even human? He finally seemed to have realized that he might have provoked someone he shouldn't have. Vanessa, Katie, and Krista stood at the door of the hotel. They were well aware of his unfathomable skills, but scenes like this were still hard to absorb. It was all so unreal. Katie was practically in shock. She'd seen this sort of stuff in movies, but that was make-believe. How could there be such a powerful person in real life? The commotion attracted a gaggle of tourists who were staying in the hotel. Passers-by stopped as well, taking photo of the brawl's aftermath with their phones. The evening street outside the hotel suddenly became noisy and lively. Many of the onlookers figured they'd just witnessed a scene for a movie being shot. And sure enough, a wealthy-looking middle-aged tourist walked up to James. "Sorry to disturb you," he said, "but are you guys filming a movie?" Startled by the man's sudden proximity, James stepped back on full alert, ready to defend himself again. This in turn startled the tourist. "Oh, sir, I'm sorry. Don't misunderstand. It's just that I am here from Cape Town on a whale-watching vacation. I've loved kung fu movies since I was young. I've seen every Bruce Lee film 100 times. He made a couple of signature Bruce Lee moves to demonstrate his enthusiasm. "Is there any chance I could take a picture with you?" he asked. James smiled bitterly in his heart. He had just fought off 10 goons and was now being treated like a movie legend. He looked at the man's eager face and said, "Sure, why not?" He could only blame himself for being too outstanding, he thought with amusement. "That's great," the man said. He took out his phone excitedly and snapped 2 selfies with James. He couldn't have been more delighted. Afterward, he handed James a business card. The name on it read Samkello Dlamini. If James was ever in Cape Town in the future, Samkello said he would be honored to show him around. Henry stood off to the side, trying not to draw attention to himself. Because James had been staring at him, he did not dare to run away. Terrified, the only thing he could think to do was call his father to come save him. James overheard the call. "That's good," he thought. "When the old man comes, I will teach him a lesson too. It saves me the trouble of finding him myself." Not long after, a Mercedes-Benz E450 pulled up in front of the Masodero Hotel. When Henry saw the car, his eyes instantly lit up with hope. The car door opened, and a middle-aged man who looked very similar to Henry stepped out. He shouted coldly, "Who's bothering my son?" He was not a physically powerful-looking man, but he had the aura of a mafia chief. Seeing that his savior had come, Henry ran up to him and pointed at James. "It's him! That's the guy!" Without any warning, the older man took out a pistol from his pocket and aimed it at James. "James, run!" Vanessa shouted when she saw the man take out the gun. Krista, Katie, and Kaya also screamed at the same time. They knew the gun in the guy's hand was the real thing. But what really made things surreal was that the watching crowd still thought it was all part of a movie shoot. They figured the gun in the gangster's hand was just a prop. They not only didn't feel like they were in danger, they watched the whole thing with great interest. One tourist kept praising Henry's father's excellent acting skills. He gave him a thumbs up and cheered him on. It was weird,